On today's episode of Locked On Wild, who are the top 10 prospects currently in the Minnesota Wild farm system?
You're Locked On Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Of Locked On Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and your favorite podcast platforms so you don't miss out on any new episodes throughout the week. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On today's episode of Locked On Wild, we are ranking the top 10 prospects in the Minnesota Wild system. Obviously, a lot of names, and so we'll see who made the cut and who is just on the outside. Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod joining us here today. Isha, we obviously had a few additions to the Minnesota Wild prospect pool with the NHL draft, highlighted by a guy that I don't think anybody expected to be there at 13, and in this case at number 12. And so should be fun to just kind of see where we're at, because there are plenty of names. There are only 10 spots in the top 10.
Shoot, man, there's a guy at 122 who no one expected to be there as well, who the Wild nabbed. This was another awesome draft, but can you expect anything less of Judd Brackett?
No, I mean, he just has made this a routine, and another 3 guys in Zeev Buium, Ryder Ritchie, and Aaron Kiviharu, who were ranked at one point all as first-round prospects. And some injuries led to them falling in the draft, but Kiviharu in the 4th went up to Bill Guerin and said, "You guys just got the steal of the draft. I loved that." Then you get Ryder Ritchie in the 2nd, and of course, all the excitement we had with Zeev being picked up at number 12. So
I love the goaltender too, man. Like he's a project. He's not going to sniff pro for, at least 4 or even, like at least 4 years. But the fact that he came right out of minor hockey, right out of U18 and played a solid chunk of WHL hockey this year on a mediocre team and put up good numbers. Dude, going from U18 minor hockey in Canada to the WHL is a massive jump. I don't think people in the United States understand how big of a jump that is. And he became a top goalie for the team, a 1A, right out of minor in the same season. So like this kid has talent. He has insane flexibility. I'm super excited to see how he develops there in Red Deer.
Yeah, that should be fun to keep tabs on him and the rest of the guys. Now the expectation is that we'll see Zeev potentially once his season with Denver is done. It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if he goes the same route. And I've been saying this all week. It wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if he goes the same route that Brock Faber did. And once Denver season is done, signs his ELC, hops in at the, final bit of the season, depending on how far Denver goes.
Assuming they don't go on a run again, which their team is absolutely stacked still. So,
yeah. And I mean, if he ends up as a back-to-back national champion, that's not a bad fallback either. So it should be exciting to kind of follow tabs on him.
Well, same with Riga Lorenz. Like we could have 2 Denver guys signing ELCs next year.
Time will tell, and we'll see where they stack up on the top 10. We're going to start at 10 because if we started at number 1, that's no fun. You gotta build up to the top of the list.
I promise you, number 1 is going to be fun, though. I know first off's not in the system anymore, but I promise number 1 will still be fun. But but at number 10, obviously there's a lot of honorable mentions. 10 was honestly the hardest one for me to pick because you have Bankier, you got Pert, you got Lambos, you got Point. There's a lot of great guys that could be in that 10 spot. I'm going to go with Rasmus Kupalainen, though. Had a great first year in major junior hockey, and he's actually going to go and play in the Finnish Liga this next year, which I think will be massive for his development. Now, if he had already played in Liga and, say, had a good year, I probably would have put him higher on this list because the Finnish Liga is a tough league to play in. It's not a high scoring league, but we saw his scoring ability in major junior already. And yeah, I really like this prospect. He's only 18. So even if he plays this whole next year in Liga, delivers and checks all the boxes that Judd Bracken and Billy Guerin and just the development team want him to check, I think, I don't know how long he stays in Europe. 1 year, maybe comes back to North America and plays in the AHL, or maybe Billy Guerin and co just say, hey, play 2 years there and then just come over and play pro when there's opportunities at the highest level in training camp to come play for the Minnesota Wild. But last year, 58 games played, 28 goals, 28 assists for the Oshawa Generals, and was a contributor in the playoffs as well with 11 points in 21 games. He's just incredibly well-rounded, tough to play against. Some nights goes on like runs where he'll go like, 5 to 8 points in like 3 games. He's quiet on other stretches, but even when he's quiet and not producing offensively, it's not like he's an anchor at all for his line mates and for the squad.
Yeah, I like the fact that he is at 18 starting to really make some noise. And, depending on what happens, his ELC is one of those that is slide eligible. And so that means depending on what happens this year, that may not even kick in. And so then that kind of pushes his ELC down the road one more year. But
playing pro in Liga is awesome, man. Liga, I know it's like it's not as prestigious. It's not held to the same regard as the KHL and the SHL, but in my opinion, it's an awesome hybrid league because the ice is not as big as the SHL and the KHL. It's not as small as the NHL. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, and it's just there's a lot of skill in that league, but because there's a lot of big, tough two-way guys, you really have to learn. You're forced to learn that side of the game, and just because it's not a high-scoring league doesn't mean it's not one of the better leagues in Europe. I mean, I can't say I'll put it up against the SHL, but it's right under.
Okay. Let's move on to 9. Who do you have at number 9?
So 9, I have Damon Hunt, 22 years old. Okay. Had a cup of coffee with the Minnesota Wild this year, and didn't look completely out of place. Did he produce? Not really, but he didn't look out of place. He didn't look 100% comfortable either. And he was one of the few guys who actually did really well in Iowa this last year, all things considered. Just shy of 30 points, 29 points in 51 games. Was only a -4 where some of these other young guys, first-year Iowa guys, were like, they were leaking goals left, right, and center. I really like what I've seen from him so far. I think he has taken a step up. I think he has developed. I mean, man, it was enough for the Wild to actually give him a 12 game look this year. And I don't think he's just a scoring defenseman. Like there is more to his game. He's got good gaps, especially when he commits to closing space when guys are coming down the wing. Is he the biggest guy? No, but I mean, he's still over 6 feet tall, man. I mean, like, what do we expect these days? So no, I really like Damon Hunt in the system, and I think he'll be, again, he's one of those guys that he won't be gifted a spot, but it's going to be competitive in training camp, and he's going to be one of those guys that the Wild are keeping an eye on.
Well, and if we were to have a rash of injuries,
he's one of the first calls up.
He is probably the first call up.
He's just one of those who in training camp could maybe surprise, and like he could be one of the last cuts in preseason because the Wild are like, all right, well, we're giving you rope here because and I think that's a possibility
for sure. Let's hit 8 before we break, and then we'll go through the final 7 after that.
All right, I have a guy who hasn't played pro yet, but he's coming to Iowa this year, and that is Hunter Haight, Memorial Cup champion, 20 years old. Had an unbelievable playoffs where in 17 games, he had 9 goals, 13 points, had his best season yet in junior, 67 points in 68 games. Now, I know he had 51 points in 42 games the year before, but he really just took a step up in just every regard and defensively as well. Like he wasn't just a run and gun. He wasn't just setting guys up. Like he took charge and actually found his goal scoring ability too in the lineup, and I really loved his play. Though it wasn't reflected in necessarily the points, I do think he had a better season this year than in 2022, 2023. I mean, it is reflecting in the hardware. The Memorial Cup is not an easy tournament to win, and it's not like he was the guy on his team. But man, I really loved his year. He was third in scoring behind two guys who were Zane Parek, who again was an absolute monster this year. Michael Misa was second in scoring, and he was third for the team as well. And I just think there's so much upside to this guy, and I don't think he'll struggle like a lot of these defensemen did in Iowa. And I know he's a center. That's why I think he's going to come in, and he's a pretty big guy as well. He plays big. I shouldn't say he's a big guy, but he plays big. And I don't think that playing in a league with men is going to hinder him much, because he's great at finding that open ice. And whether he's setting up the play or being the one now able to pull the trigger. Again, this last year, I really saw that step up, and I was impressed. So I don't think he's going to struggle too much. Like, the first 20 games pro are going to be a shock for anyone coming up from major junior. But I think he'll adjust quicker than most.
Yeah, and those take charge guys, I think, are better insulated if they are willing to either facilitate or kind of step up and do it themselves, as opposed to those guys that are kind of waiting for that pass to come every game. And so I would love that if we see him come in like that.
He's less cerebral and more take charge, which is what I like.
Yeah, actions. Step up and do it. That's my philosophy that I like is when something has to happen, the guys that step up and do it are like those are the ones that you want. They know what they know what needs to happen, and they just go do it. So that is 10, 9, and 8 on our list. We'll get 7 to 1 here before the show is up, but we will take a quick pause. Today's listener question, and you're going to have to wait till the end for this one. Today's listener question is, which name not in the top 10 would you put in your top 10 Minnesota Wild prospects? So save that for the end. This is one of those wait to the end to answer. Which player on the top 10, on Isha's top 10, which player would you put in yours that wasn't included in this one? We'll continue the top 10 Minnesota Wild prospects on today's episode of Locked On Wild after this. Today's episode of Locked On Wild is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. Hey, it worked great for the Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, and that formula can help win championships and also keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. We hope you are enjoying your 4th of July long weekend. And for your second listen, make sure that you check out all of the offerings at the Sota Pod, whether it be Fellowship of the Rink, any of the other offerings, and MNCAA, my appearances throughout the week as well. It's a full plate Judd's Buds, full plates at the Sota Pod, and obviously a lot of draft recap this week, Isha. But those interviews that Hoppy and Joe Smith pull, pretty A+.
Riley Height is the next one. They just had Hunter Haight on, and Riley Height's the next one coming up next week. So
wow,
be sure to check it out.
Excellent.
Kid's a beauty. Let's just say he's a Billy Guerin type of guy. When the guys asked him, You think you're going to make the team this year? He just oozed confidence. Like he ain't going back to junior. He ain't playing in the minors. This guy's playing NHL.
I'm all about those guys forcing it to be a conversation this year. So if he is one of the guys that does, sign me up. Let's go to number 7 on the top 10 list.
So this guy really impressed me in his jump in development this year. And speaking of, we talked about it earlier in the show, the University of Denver, we got Rieger Lorenz, man.
Okay.
Rieger Lorenz, an awesome winger who in his freshman year at Denver, just didn't get as much opportunity, didn't get a lot of ice time. But when he did, he took advantage of it. This year was given a bigger role, and oh my goodness, was he just shot out of a cannon, man. Incredible skating. Like, not necessarily the fastest north-south. I'm not saying he's slow, but like, that's not, when I say really good skating, I'm not just saying his, just straight up north-south speed. Just everything else that goes into his edges and things like that really impressed me. I had the pleasure of seeing him live during the NCHC finals, and I was blown away. I was blown away with how good he was. I think I even had you on an episode. I think that's when we started doing this collaboration, and I was just swooning over him after that game. 16 goals, 14 assists, 30 points in 44 games, and I only project to see him take another step up now that he's going to be one of the guys, potentially one of the top line guys, if not at least top 6. Every single night. And yeah, there are obviously other options, and this one might be a stretch in some of your listeners' eyes, but I really loved what I saw from Rieger Lorenz. He has that goal scoring ability. He has that good shot. 16 goals this year and an incredible skater. I cannot wait to see the jump that he takes next year.
Yeah, I'm all on board. Let's go to number 6.
So number 6, and I now know your listeners are going to scream bloody murder at me. 6, I have his teammate, Zeev Buium.
Okay.
Again, one of the best, if not the best defenseman in the draft this year.
Yes.
And I say one of because I truly believe that there are some more well-rounded, all-around better, like, I should just say defenseman with an all-around game that is better than Buium's all-around game, but where Zeev specializes in, those don't grow on trees, right?
Sure.
His skating ability is awesome. His offensive awareness is awesome. And the fact that he came into college in his first year and put up 50 freaking points, and his vision, his ability to find open ice, find, just quarterback, not only just a power play, but just 5-on-5 play at large was nothing short of spectacular.
Yeah.
The reason why he's, not higher on this list is because he's played 1 year of college hockey. I don't think he's going to regress, but he hasn't played pro yet. And I've only seen a very awesome and amazing sample size, but a small sample size. I'll probably eat my words, the first 20 games of the season or even the first 15 games of the college season when he, is 30 points in 15 games. That's very much a possibility. I love everything about his game. I don't have anything to critique other than, I just haven't seen enough, and he hasn't played pro yet compared to some of these guys who are above him.
Yeah. And so this is just mostly a timeline thing,
it's just, he's still just new to this level of hockey, despite him deserving to go where he did in the draft and deserving the title as arguably one of the best defensemen in this year's draft.
And another solid to great year of college hockey. And he's
number 1, probably, assuming Wallstedt, is not a prospect, but a player, next year.
That's the thing about these prospect rankings lists is, it's where you're at that point. And so if we revisit this, it's likely that Zeev is probably 1 or 2.
Well, it's the same thing like with Height. If Height comes in and plays for the Wild this year, he's not a prospect anymore. And he should have been higher on the list, sort of thing, right? It's just, this is my rankings. Roast me in the comments. Number 5. We're on number 5 now.
Yeah, number 5.
Liam Ohgren. Now, I've been this guy's biggest critic, but mostly just because of his World Junior play in his first year anyways. His second year, despite him not scoring a lot, it was just bad puck luck. It was just hitting the post. He was he was amazing. He did everything right but score. And the Wild saw that in him as they gave him a chance this year. Played a few AHL games, played 4 NHL games, actually produced in those games as well. And the Wild didn't really have anything to openly critique about his game. He's played pro, right? And that's huge. And he did 19 points in 26 games of pro hockey this last year. So he not only played in the SHL, which I said earlier in the show is, I'd say, just behind the KHL as one of the top teams in Europe. It's an awesome league to develop in. Look how many of these top Swedes have come right from the SHL so young too, right? Like Elias Pettersson for the Canucks being, one recent guy who was playing in the SHL at 18 years old.
Yeah,
could hang with those men in those leagues. Won a championship as a little string bean, right? Liam Ohgren, the fact that he came off major injury, did well playing pro this year in both the SHL, small sample size in North America, but still in the AHL and in the NHL. That's huge, man. That's huge. And that's why I have him above Zeev, is just because he was playing pro hockey and he is pretty much AHL or NHL ready at this point. So timeline thing, but still.
Yeah, still on track. Let's break. We'll finish with 4, 3, 2, and 1 as we finish our top 10 prospect rankings on today's episode of Locked On Wild. One final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Once again, we thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen each and every day. Make sure to enjoy. We've had a lot of episodes this week trying to get you ready for all the 4th of July travel. So if you are headed up to the cabin this weekend, on the road today, we've got a couple of episodes for you to help keep you company in the car. And obviously, we had a lot of recap of free agency early in the week. We have thrown a lot at you. We also had a chance to talk with former North Stars forward Jack Carlson on the Sunday live show. So we cut that up into an episode for you. A lot to digest. Some of those car trips are long, and so just wanted to give you a bunch of options here for the week. So hopefully enjoy all of those. And if you do, make sure to hit that like button or give us a nice 5-star review if you're listening on an audio platform. Isha Jahromi of the Sota Pod joining us as we finish the top 10 prospects list. And a reminder, our listener question for today: which player not in Isha's top 10 would you put in yours? The honorable mention, the omissions category. Which player not in Isha's top 10 would you put in yours? Post it in the comments, and we'll take whichever is the best answer, and that'll lead off Monday's show. So Isha, let's get to number 4.
Yeah, we'll get to number 4. I have to say, leaving Pert off the list was tough. That was the one where it's like, I literally, I can show you, but I crossed it off, wrote it, but I'm sticking to my list here. At number 4, I have Riley Heidt.
Okay.
I have Riley Heidt. Now, there was a handful of players that came from major junior hockey who played this last year in Iowa, and those points kind of meant nothing because they weren't able to adjust in their first year. A guy who I think will is Riley Heidt, man. Like, you don't put up these numbers in major junior, lead the team the way he did, elevate his line mates the way he did, and just look as dominant as he did, and not just take that jump to pro, whether it's the National Hockey League or the AHL seamlessly. And he's going to get every opportunity to make the Minnesota Wild this year. I know a lot of you maybe, not happy with what happened during free agency, this or even the draft, who knows? Trust me, if he shows even a fraction of what he showed towards the end of his season in Prince George at training camp, the Wild are going to give him every opportunity to make this team because he's that good. He is an incredible goal scorer. He's an incredible setup guy. He's just an all-around, perfect forward for a junior player to make that jump to pro. Now, is he like a bona fide center at the NHL level? I think so, but he's one of those guys where he could make the transition to wing a lot easier than some of these guys. Well, then just some other players as well. I think he's just such a good hockey mind where it's, if he has to score, he'll score. If he has to take charge on the power play, he will. If he has to play penalty kill, he will. Now, is he the greatest? No, but he will, because he's just that all around of a hockey player. And the amount of points that he put up this year should prove that. 80 assists, 37 goals in 66 games. And he's only gotten better. It wasn't like this was a fluke jump, because the year before, 25 goals, 72 assists in 97 games played. And in his first full year, okay, he played 22 games, I think, as like a 16, 17-year-old in 2020, 2021. But in his first full year in 2021, 2022, he had 21 goals, 58 points in 65 games played. Those are numbers where, some of these guys this year in the draft, in the first round, had put up those numbers, right? Where he was drafted after that 97-point monster season. So this year, he only got better. He was a plus 34, and he had 19 points in 15 playoff games as well. I mean, this kid's unbelievable, man. This kid's unbelievable. He's one of, if not the best kid that the Wild have drafted in the last few years to come just straight out of major junior, in my opinion.
That's, and the numbers themselves are just, they're eye-opening. And if he can translate that level of playmaking to the NHL, I mean, that's like 30 goals right there. 25, 30 goals easy. He
plays such a fast game. And what is the NHL in 2024? It's a fast game, right? So I just think he fits the mold of what a young NHL player is right now. So I am so excited to see this kid in training camp and what he'll bring to the Wild. And if he goes down to Iowa, he's going to torch. Gonna save Seth some editing there. He's going to absolutely torch, dude.
Well, and the two choices this season, because of how his contract is structured, either he plays at the NHL level or he just goes junior. Yeah, he just goes back to juniors for one more year. And then the way I look at it here, if he were to go back, like next year, he's on the NHL roster.
Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, if for some reason he has to play a year in Iowa, like next year, or at the end of this year in Prince George, right? If they don't make the playoffs, or if they don't make a run for the Memorial Cup, which again, if he's on the team, they will make a run in the playoffs. Whenever he comes to Iowa, if he plays there, you're going to see that he's levels above the AHL, because he's already levels above the Dub right now.
Okay. That's the key, is if you just look out a place at a level, it's time to go to the next one.
So. Yeah. So that's why I'm saying, like, he's played 3 years major junior. He's dominated in those 3 years. That's why the Wild are going to be like, and it sucks that the CHL have this stupid rule where, like, some guys can't just get exempt to play in pro, which I hope, like, I've heard that, like, there's rumblings of them adjusting that rule, which, God, I hope so, because if anything, it's not good for these guys' development, because it's like, you need to be playing against men. You need to be playing at the pro level, yet you're going back to junior where you're already dominating kids, right? So it sucks that he's not their, like, top priority, or maybe the Wild would have tried to work with his agent to get him a contract overseas to go play a year, in Europe, which again would have been awesome. But that doesn't happen a lot. That's very few and far between. Usually you have to be from Europe and have that special ELC to be able to do that, like you mentioned with Rasmus earlier. But dude, this kid's so sick. I've been swooning now for like 4 minutes on him. I cannot wait to see him play in the NHL.
Yeah, he's gonna provide just one of those players that you turn your head when they're on the ice, and you're watching every single time they have the puck.
Yep. And my number 3 pick is that as well, Seth, in Danila Yurov. Like, he's the Riley Heidt of Russia right now in their system, right? Like, he's already playing pro, and oh wow, you give him minutes and he absolutely dominates and helps you win a championship.
What a concept.
Weird. Man, the KHL is freaking wild. But no, unbelievable season. unbelievable season, 21 goals, 49 points in 62 games played in the second best league on the planet. In the second best league on the planet where half the players are juiced, right? Like,
yeah.
Highly doubt this kid was on the Russian gas. And I say that tongue in cheek, dude, the KHL is a juice league. Like it's fact. Like a lot of there's a reason why some of their older players can continue to put up point per game well into their, late 30s. The fact that he's in the second best league in the world skill wise and a league that has these juiced friggin' monsters from Northern Russia, like it was so awesome to see him absolutely take charge and be one of the better players on his team. He was the best player on his team. He led the team in scoring, man. He led the team in scoring, led the team in points. It sucks that the Wild don't have room for him this next year, but playing one full season pro where he had minutes, because he played 59 games in 2022, 2023, but again, the reason his points are so low is because he had like Zeev even pointed out Spokesy on Judd's Buds that like there were some nights where he would get like under 8 minutes.
Yeah.
How do you expect this guy to produce? He's not going to, right? Oh, look, you give him top line minutes, and there's no way that Metallurg is going to cut his minutes this year, especially coming off a championship.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to see another step in his game this year, and he's going to be primed once the KHL season is done. The Wild, let's be honest, they're going to be god awful this year, especially with how crazy the Central Division just got after free agency. As soon as because he only signed a 1 year extension, right? He only signed 1 year.
1 year extension at the KHL, and I think it is at this point. I think it's pretty likely. As soon as it's done, as soon as they're out of the playoffs or his playoff run is done with Metallurg, he's coming over. He's coming over. Just like Ohgren, just like Kuznetsov. I don't think there's any at this point. I don't think there's any attempt by the KHL to keep him. It's go get your payday one more time at the K, and then there's work to be done here. So, him at 3. I'm intrigued to see what 2 and 1 are on this list. I have an idea who one of them is going to be, but I am completely. I
told you number 1 would be spicy.
Okay, so I know who number 2 then is. So let's talk about him.
Number 2 is Jesper Wallstedt, who
I can't wait for number 1.
I almost just left him off the list and just said like he's not a prospect anymore.
Yeah, because
he's playing pro, right?
Yeah. We assume that he's just going to be on the NHL roster for at least enough games to be not considered a rookie anymore or on the NHL roster full time.
Yeah, well, he's only 21 still, which is why I'm like, okay, he played 2 full AHL seasons, and he's shown that, like, okay, he is not only good enough for that league, but he's a really, really good goalie in that league at only 21 years of age, which is, primed and ready for the National Hockey League. And man, Wild fans, you have no idea how lucky you are. You have no idea how lucky you are to have this guy in your system. Seriously. Because even some of these other top goalies, Ottinger, Thatcher Demko, who played college hockey, like they didn't sniff the National Hockey League until they were like almost 20 or like 24, 25. This guy's already sniffing the National Hockey League and he's 21, guys. Goalies generally do not even get a sniff until their mid-20s, and then they're still considered young goaltenders, right? Because goalies generally pop later, assuming they aren't riddled with injuries. And this is just, there's a reason they picked him in the first round. There's a reason they picked him so high in the first round. Goalies don't go in the first round because many young goalies don't make that jump to the National Hockey League. Their development isn't rushed anymore for good reason. Like the last big one was Marc-Andre Fleury, and that was in freaking 2000, right? Mm-hmm. 2000, 2001, whenever the hell it was.
Yeah, one of those.
So I have him at number 2 because he's just so special of a prospect in such a unique positions where we do not see guys this far along in their development and ready to come into the league at such a young age. And I'm not one of those who are like demanding we see him play half the season. I'm one of those who are like, we have Gustafsson. We had one good year with him. We had one bad year with him. Let's see what he is this year. Even if the Wild is even when the Wild aren't going to be that good in front of them, goalies can still show how good they are in bad seasons. I mean, I always I always fall back on the Thomas Vokoun in Florida. Thomas Vokoun, incredible goalie in the dark days of Florida, right? Everyone still knew Thomas Vokoun was an amazing goalie. His underlying numbers were good despite the wins not necessarily being there all the time. He's in my number 2 spot. Even if we see him have, a 20 game stretch this year to prime him for when Fleury retires, that's fine by me. He does need to get a handful of NHL games, but I am okay with him, getting around that mark and not, 30 to 40 games like some, Wild fans want him to get. Now, if Gustafsson or heaven forbid Fleury get injured early and he has to play that role, let's go. He's ready to do so. I just hate forcing prospects that I don't think need to be forced yet. And he's ready. So, when the opportunity's there, throw him in. It's not like they have to trade Gustafsson right now before training camp to make sure he has a spot, because one of them is gonna get banged up. No hockey player, no goalie all season stays 100% healthy.
Yeah, and I would just I just at this point with the whole goalie thing, I just would rather there be some sort of backup plan to what is expected to happen to start the season, because with all the injuries that happened last year, both goalies were hurt. Both goalies were hurt at one point during the year. Now, banged up / hurt is one thing, but there really was no plan, because it was viewed that Jesper wasn't quite ready last year. Well, now, if you have all 3 guys this year, Jesper is going to get starts, and then he's going to fill in when there's injuries.
He's that bona fide third in the rotation.
Yeah. And
not like, maybe we'll give him time this year. It's like, no. Like, he's the next guy up. Yeah.
Yeah. It's his. All right. I'm super curious. Who do you have as number 1?
Well, since Firstov is out of the system now, I have the rough and tough, newly drafted Stevie Leskovar, baby, is my number 1. Let's go. This guy, bro, he's got hands. He's got hands. Now, does he decide to use them every night? No. And you know why? Because he's usually in the box, because he's defending his teammates, or he's hitting every single player that moves. Seth, this guy is an old school hockey player who has actually decent skating, who's quick for a big 6'4" monster of an OHL player. And he's not even an overager yet. Now, Z was saying, I think he's a double overager. Nah, dude, he's 19 years of age right now. He actually can skate. He is defensively aware, right? He put up 113 penalty minutes last year. Again, exaggerated a bit by all the fighting he did, because as soon as he lays out someone with some beautiful open ice hits, he looks at the big guy on the other team, and he says, "Come here. I will answer. Dude, I've literally on the Sota Pod, the highlight package that I showed when we were talking about him when we were going through and running down the draft. He laid out this kid. Right? Laid out this kid in open ice. The kid was knocked out. The kid was out. So much so that the ref had to push him away so they wouldn't skate over his freaking head. And he points at the other team's tough guy and so, "Come here." And then proceeds to beat the piss out of him.
Oh, man.
Dude, yeah. He had some of the most amazing open ice hits that I saw in all of junior hockey last year. His skating for a big guy is reasonable, okay? He was drafted. He's not just a goon. He was drafted for a reason. Now, assuming his wires don't cross after throwing these big hits, I don't know. And again, this is tongue-in-cheek, me putting him at number 1. I love old school hockey. I love fighting. I love the big hits, guys, right? It's not out of the realm of possibility that this guy, is Bugard light, Reeves light, as one of those guys who, in a few years, is an option for the Minnesota Wild to bring some grit, bring some fear factor, especially when they hit that point where they're actually going to contend, when they're actually competing in the playoffs. Because I'm sorry, you have to have at least one guy who can skate, but who brings the fear factor.
Yeah. and somebody that can actually give you a little something more than just that, but can also can bring that with too.
Dude,
just that combo platter.
I love this kid so much. I cannot believe that the Wild drafted him, dude. I'm so happy. And I know a lot of you are going, Isha, you're crazy putting him at number 1. Yes, I am. It's tongue in cheek. I get it. Sorry, Pert. Let's go, Var's taking over. Let's go, Var's taking over.
It's time. It's time. Let's go, Var. That's our show. Great show today. Good work, Isha. And for listeners, make sure to check out everything that the Sota Pod has to offer. Whether it be Judd's Buds, whether it be Fellowship of the Rings, whether it be just general episodes of the Sota Pod, you name it, Sota Pod has got it. And so make sure to throw some love their way. Listeners, we'll be back and ready to rock for Monday. We'll see what Alex and I can uncover for Monday's episode. So until then, we'll see you. Have a great rest of your weekend. Make sure to join us for the live show at 8 p.m. on Monday night as well. Alex will be a guest with Denny and I as we talk you through the latest news with the Minnesota Wilds. Beyond that, enjoy your weekends. We'll be back ready to rock on Monday with another episode of Locked On Wild, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network.